Hello and welcome back to the Nutrition and Life podcast. My name is Lisa, I'm your host, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with runner, triathlete, ultra Spartan runner, and Ironman athlete Shawn Hoyt. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I am too. I'm excited to talk about all things endurance training and also just staying fit as we age. To kick us off, though, I would love to hear just a little bit about you and how you got into your training in general. I know it's been many, many years, but just tell us your little journey.
Yeah, no, so, for me, I feel like my fitness journey, like most people's, has had many chapters to it. My chapter started fairly early. I actually did my first marathon when I was 14 years old. And by the time I finished college, I had already done five. Then I took a break for a while where I didn't work out at all. I was in law school. I was a young lawyer. I was starting a family, and I gained a lot of weight, got out of shape. Pretty typical. Many of us go through that phase. Then for probably 15, 20 years, I got into what I would call the weekend warrior phase, where, I was doing 10Ks and half marathons and started doing like short triathlons and, just enough to keep myself occupied. I wasn't really like setting any records. I wasn't doing anything particularly out of my comfort zone, but I was still building a family. I was still working and traveling a lot, kind of felt like all that I could do at that stage in my life. And then as I got in my 40s, I started to hit a point where I felt like, maybe now I need to start ratcheting everything back even further. Things started to hurt. I started to get injured. And I was, starting to, maybe do I start accepting the fact that I kind of have to give up a lot of this? And my mindset was starting down that direction. But then I was blessed enough to start surrounding myself with kind of new people that came into my life, new groups that came into my life. And as a result of that, it really shifted my thinking from, this is just an inevitable natural period of decline to, no, this can be a whole new beginning. And at that stage of my life, really, as I was just about to enter into my 50s, I started doing things I'd never done before. Signed up for my first Spartan races, started doing longer distance triathlons, started pushing myself harder. And now I'm 55, and I feel like in many ways I'm in the best shape of my life, even though, I'm fairly far along in my fitness journey at this point.
Well, I have to say, I actually got a little bit goosebumps as you were talking about the mindset shift and the surrounding yourself with people that elevated you because that is so, so, so powerful. And I think probably 98, 99% of the people just think it's inevitable, exactly as you said, as we age, to ache more, to gain body fat, to be less capable of doing anything really. And hearing how just that shift in mindset and seeing, witnessing in other people that that doesn't have to be true, and that it's also not just for the few selected people, a few unicorns out there, but truly when we put our mind and our effort towards something, that we too can be part of that group. We just need to make that decision towards it. And so tell me a little bit more about that time where things are really shifted for you. I'm super interested in that. Um, what did that kind of like spiral within you, or how did you change your approach basically in terms of your training, in terms of your nutrition?
Well, part of it was, as you get older, many of us get into pretty comfortable routines. And you do the same races year over year, you do the same activities year over year, you have your kind of comfortable daily routine that you like to stick to. And, that can be, especially if it's a healthy routine, that can be great, but it starts to limit your options.
Mhm.
And really, what kind of helped me was when I made a decision that really forced me to break my routine and start to set some new ones. And in particular, I had been running with a few friends in the local area, and I would run local races. And I kept hearing about this track club that's near me called the Belmont Track Club, and I heard there were some really inspiring athletes in this club, really nice people, and they were open. They would take anybody who wanted to come. And it wasn't that far away, and I knew I had some mutual friends that could introduce me. And in the back of my mind, I knew that, okay, this is going to be good for me. I need to do this. But the thing that held me up, literally for probably 2 years, was the fact that they started most of their workouts at 5:30 in the morning. Which would mean that for me to get there on time and stretch and whatever, I'm probably waking up at 4:30. And for the longest time, like that simple shift in my routine was just felt like it was too much. Especially in New England where I live. It gets cold, really cold that time in the morning for a big chunk of the year. And so I just kept putting it off. And finally I made the decision, okay, I'm going to start doing this. And it took me about a month or two to build that new routine of getting up early and getting there on time. But then, within a month or two, I'd say, it really became part of my new routine. I became consistent in attending, and I became the group that I was now spending my time with, had a very different framework of what's possible, and a very different framework of kind of like what's attainable, for people in their 40s and 50s, than I had at the time. And for example, give you a practical example. I've been running a few half marathons and things like that, but I had ruled out the fact that I would ever do a marathon again. I had said I'm too old, my knees hurt too much, I can't do that again. And so my last marathon had been in 2001. But I finally decided, you know what? Like, now that these people have shown me that that's just an excuse. I can do a marathon again. So I decided to sign up for the 2024 Boston Marathon. Obviously, hadn't qualified, so I would run it for charity. And I just threw myself into it. And then, sure enough, after a 24-year or 23-year hiatus, I ran the marathon again. And then that unlocked me to the other big thing that I'd always thought was impossible, which was doing the Ironman. And I'd always told myself, no, I can do a lot of things, but I could never do the Ironman. Like it just was, I had tremendous admiration for the people that could do it, but I didn't think I was one of them. And then, after that mindset shift, I suddenly asked, well, why not? And that became the big shift versus like I can't to why couldn't I? And when I made that shift in language, I started to think, okay, like break it down. Maybe I could do this. And eventually I did it.
There are so many powerful points to this. So first of all, I think from like studying habits and changes in people, it's so clear that one of the most powerful things we can do is surrounding ourselves with people where the new desired habit or thing that we want to put into our routine as well, and where that is the norm. And you mentioned that in that group, they've been running for years. That is the norm. They have a different mindset. And you also mentioned that they opened up your thinking to what else is possible. And whenever someone says something like that, the story pops into my mind where the first person runs a sub 10-second 100-meter sprint, and then suddenly within that year, I don't know, six other people do it. But before that, it's like, oh no, there's this block where we're like, okay, I'm 50 now, I'm old, or 10
Yes.
seconds, it's too long, or I'm a female, I'm this, or whatever it might be, and where we just place limitations upon ourselves, where it's like when we shift our thinking exactly in the way that you said, why not? Or why not me? Or let's find out from that place of like, oh no, everything is hard. Why would it be me? To just flip-flopping that. I love that. I love that so much. And I mean, of course, you mentioned that things had actually initially started to kind of like ache a little bit, and that's why you were thinking, oh, maybe I'm just too old for that. So my thought or my question to you now is, how do you now make sure that you keep those little niggly things or those aches in their place and that you don't get injured?
I will say that as you age, you can, I've really become a firm believer that you can continue to do really amazing things, but you do have to shift your thinking. the thought that in your 50s you're gonna, run your fastest 5K time, you know, might not be a realistic. Like, for example, for me, as I've gotten older, I've gotten slower. So I shifted my focus from speed to endurance. Because what I found now is that with discipline and training, I can go a long, long, long way, longer than I ever thought possible. It might be a little slower. For example, when I was 21, you can see it right above me in one of these numbers here. I ran a sub 3 marathon. Like, I don't think I'll ever do that again. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that I still can't do great things. I just have to think about doing them differently or doing different things. And so I think for each of us, we need to do an honest assessment about, what our, what will our body give us? And what won't it give us? And like right now, if I went out to try to do things that put a lot of pounding on my knees, like, my body's probably going to object, and eventually I'm probably going to run into some difficulties there. But if I pick things that, play to my strengths, then I can do great things. And that's really why I've embraced triathlon and obstacle course racing as I've gotten older, because it's not all running. I'm doing these different disciplines and cross training in all these really interesting ways. And then that helps my body to get through it. Because I'm not running 5 days a week or 6 days a week. I'm mixing it up with swimming and biking and things like that. So it's really important, I think, for all of us, if we want to push our bodies as we get older, to be really listen to our bodies and be really, be bold, and you want to push yourself, but you also got to be realistic
Mm.
about what your body will give you. Now, I do have some other thoughts about how to help your body along, which we can talk about, because no matter what you pick, it's gonna be hard. You're gonna need to focus on recovery. But I think the big reason I've been able to do some of the things I'm doing now is I'm picking my battles.
So what specifically in the sense of recovery else are you doing? Let's kind of talk about practical applications there, because some of the people I mean mostly the audience that we have are gonna be doing a combination of strength training and endurance training. So we have not, or I would say not the majority of the audience is pure endurance athletes. But yeah, what specifically do you personally incorporate when it comes to recovery, but also, I guess, training specifics? Any specifics you can give us would be helpful.
Well, even with the Ironman and some of the Spartan things that I'm doing, I've really tried not to go all cardio, to get to your point. I'm a firm believer that strength has got to be a critical component of anything that I'm doing. The importance of building muscle mass as you get older is critical. And I'm a firm believer that, I need to be building muscle at the same time that I'm, building endurance. So I'm trying to do both. For me, when I sat down to do my Ironman plan, because this is the first time I'd ever done it, this happened last year in 2024. I quickly realized that I had to build in all the swim time, I had to build in all the run time, all the bike time, but there was a fourth discipline to it. And I had to build in as much time for that fourth discipline as I had for the other three, and that was recovery. So I really felt like I had four tracks, and I was kind of really, focused and intentional about recovery every single day. So that would take a number of different forms. Number one is stretching. I did a lot of stretching, start the day and kind of end the day. I really focused on this, where strength comes in, on kind of what I would call, running strength or physical therapy. Doing a lot of things with resistance bands, with dumbbells that would build up the strength in my, the joints, um, the tendons, the muscles in a balanced way, so that I wasn't, just like putting all the pressure on one area and not supporting that area by supporting everything else. So I was doing a lot of that kind of, probably a half hour a day of just kind of what you would normally think of as PT exercises. And I swear by those as kind of a daily practice. I did a lot of kind of heat and cold. So I would do, cold right after a workout if something was sore. I would do a lot of warm Epsom salt baths and soaks. Kind of a believer in that. Um, and then I also had to start to think about where nutrition came into play with recovery. At first, I wasn't eating enough. and I was finding myself, I was weak. I was kind of getting more prone to being sore. And eventually, I don't remember how I figured it out, but I figured it out like I just need to be probably eating, maybe even like 1,000 more calories per day than I was. I was eating like a pre-Ironman type diet and yet building up towards peak Ironman training. And so, I really focused on smart eating before, during, and after workouts, and much more intentional about my nutrition during those windows. And I think it really helped, number one, with energy, but also with recovery.
The,
Um,
but yeah, I was just going to say, I'm so impressed that you really made the recovery aspect as important as all the other three training components in your instance. I would say that that is by far probably the biggest mistake I see, not just endurance athletes, but any kind of athlete make. And I mean, even if I look at my own training, so my own resistance training per day is maybe an hour, hour and 15, so 5 times per week that. And I dedicate about 10, 15 minutes of foam rolling there, and then in the evening some 15 minutes of stretch time. But it's still less than my actual training time. So I'm so, so impressed that you really make that not just a small component, but like an actual priority. And I love what you say about also having the variation in there and not just going all in on one thing, but really listening to your body as to, okay, if something is extra sore, I should do cold application, something. My muscles are more tense, maybe more heat application, really, really being in tune with your body. And I love that. I think that's really, really great. And the other thing that you're touching on with the point of nutrition, again, so common when people are like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to do this and that. And I think more often than not, they fail to increase the calories according to the increase in training demands. And then maybe an injury occurs, or as you said, you just feel weak and so on. So, really great that you became aware of that. And so, where or how did you increase the extra nutrition? I mean, we don't necessarily need to go into specific meals, but I can imagine, especially if you spend 3 hours per day training, like where do you fit in those extra 1,000 calories?
well, I used to, be when I wasn't heavy into an endurance event and training for that, I tended to be an intermittent faster. So I wouldn't eat in the morning. I would work out fasted most of the time. And I really realized that once I was dialing it up for an endurance event, I had to shift. I couldn't do that anymore. I needed like, some good, healthy, complex carbohydrates before my workout. So if I'm going to go out for a 4 hour bike ride, like I'm going to have some banana bread and some honey and, and a banana and something like that to really kind of give myself some fuel that's going to last me, for a good chunk of that ride. And then I'm going to have, every hour I would have a bar,
Mhm.
not just liquid, but I really found that I needed the physical nutrition. And so I'd have a bar that was, I felt like I could digest quickly. And then after my workouts, with like right when I would get home, I would sit down and have, I started becoming like really enjoying whole milk, things with a lot of protein, and then also, I'd sit down and have a big bowl of cereal with whole milk, or like some peanut butter, get some good healthy fats into me. And I would try to do it around the time of workout. Like I would try not to have like a big meal later on, totally disconnected. But before, during, and after the workout, I would be generous to myself in terms of my food intake. Whereas before, I was pretty stingy with most of that stuff in the past.
Yeah, that's such a great point also that like bunching the majority of the calories around the workout where the body is most receptive to utilizing those calories properly, and some really good tips here that you give for people trying to increase their food intake in the sense of consuming liquid calories or things that are easy to digest, like some cereal, absolutely nothing wrong with that, from like if you, especially if you're trying to either add some muscle mass or you just generally have a very high calorie intake requirement, I guess. Another aspect of recovery, of course, that you sort of indirectly touched on earlier as well, was with regards to sleep. So now you mentioned oftentimes it is part of your routine to get up at 4:30. how do you make that, or how did you make that a priority, especially as you were shifting your life and turning things around a little bit?
One of the things that that I came to embrace, and I'm lucky here, my work routine permits it, is that on days when I was, my body was feeling particularly tired. Often it was the days I was up for those early workouts because I didn't do that every day. I don't think that was good for my body to be up at that time every single day. But basically is looking for, about 1 hour window sometime in the middle of the day when I could take a nap. And not everyone has the flexibility to do that with their work, but I did on, on some days anyway. And so when I could and my body really needed that, I just learned to give into it. If I'm really just feeling tired and I've got a little bit of a block, when I can do that, just go up, put out all the lights and let my body sleep for an hour. And it really had a tremendous, I think, restorative benefits. And obviously different societies have been doing that for, centuries. So it's nothing new. But in the US, I think it has a stigma to it. We feel like somehow we're being lazy, if we're napping during the day. But in some circumstances, when your body really needs it, I think it can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see that in other sports as well, where, professional athletes, all they literally do is like eat, sleep, train, eat, sleep. Like there's a reason for that. And of course, we should still try to get the majority of our high quality sleep during night and allowing for sufficient time to get those 7, 8 hours of sleep there. But again, being intuitive and listening to your body when especially when you have the luxury to be able to do so, that's a really great way to go about it. So now with your pursuit of like, well, not just attaining your own or maintaining your own physical health as you age and actually getting stronger and so on, your message for others is as well that you can and you should stay fit and strong as you age. So if someone's listening to this and they're perhaps kind of more at the beginning stage of picking fitness back up or haven't actually started anything right now, but they're inspired and they're like, oh, I did used to like endurance training. How would you recommend someone sort of eases back into things?
So I'm a big fan of, for those of you who can see on the video, I'm wearing my Spartan shirt here. I'm a big fan of the kind of Spartan philosophy and especially a lot of the kind of posts and messaging from the CEO of Spartan, Joe DeSena. And one of the things that he says that I really have taken to heart is that don't wait until you're ready. Just commit. The hardest part is just saying, I'm going to do this. Like, you may need 4 months to get ready, but sign up for the race now. And so whatever it is that's going to motivate you, I always tell people just sign up. Like just the act of courage it takes us to say, you know what, I'm going to sign up for that 10K or I'm going to sign up for that whatever it is. Get it on the calendar. Now you're accountable to yourself. You've made that commitment. You've got the time. You'll have time to get ready. And if you break it down into digestible little segments, build out a training plan. You don't need to get from where you are now to where you're going to be in a week or a month. You've got time. And, like when I signed up for my Ironman, like I was nowhere near ready. But I got a coach and I built a, 24-week training plan and I got ready. And by the time the race came, I had zero doubt I could do it. Because I had, over time built up to the volumes of activity it was going to take. So the first advice that I give to people, just to repeat myself here and tie it up, is don't wait, commit to something now. Also, I say tell everyone you know about it. Like, and that's why social media is so powerful, is when I sign up for a big race, that's one of the first things I do is I post and I said, I signed up for this thing. Like, because then you get the accountability from your entire network where they're asking you, hey, how's the training for the Ironman going? And if I'm slacking off, like that's not going to feel good. Like I want to be able to, I'm going to feel accountable to all these people that I've told about this race and to be able to tell them, oh, I'm on track, I'm doing the work and I'm getting ready. If you keep it to yourself, it's way too easy to back out of it. So sign up, tell everybody about it, and then start getting ready. You'll have plenty of time by the time race day comes.
That's a really great point that the even just the signing up and telling other people can be an awesome way of holding or being held accountable. And yeah, I would say that's a good point. Of course, you're not going to sign up for a race next week. Sometimes people do think, oh, I used to run 10K and right now I'm not running at all, so tomorrow I'm going to run, 8K or whatever. And then they feel their knees and then they're super sore and they're like, oh, well, there you go. I can't run anymore. My knees are I'm too old to be
Yes.
running. So that's kind of stupid as well, right? We
Yeah.
want to ease ourselves into it and maybe even start with like walk around walk or whatever it is and all these beautiful programs like couch to 5K or whatever else there might be. There's a reason for that. So I would also say even though like pick something that motivates you, that's a really, really great idea, but make sure you're giving yourself enough time with that.
Yeah, absolutely. With enough time and with just consistent practice, you can get from where you are to where you need to be, in plenty of time. And that's the thing that scares people is they see the gap as too great, because they're not thinking about it in the small increments.
Mm, mm. So I have three more questions when it comes to mindset because I thought that that was actually a really good point that I wanted to talk to you about. And so with all your races, first of all, now that you're doing some Spartan races, but also some Ironman and so on, is there a different approach in your mindset from one to the other? Because of course they're completely different. One is a lot longer than the other, and one is has obstacles and the other doesn't. So yeah, I'll leave you with that first question.
I really try to think about it as anything that I'm doing to make my body stronger is going to help me in everything I do. And so, like when I first started talking to my triathlon coach, and I told her, okay, we need to work in a Spartan training into the triathlon plan. I think she was like, well, wait a minute, how are we going to do that? Because they are different, but in a way they're not. Like if my Spartan training day means I'm grabbing a 30 pound, backpack and I'm going on a long ruck, that's going to help my biking and it's
Mhm.
going to help my running. And then any strength work that I do is just going to kind of give me overall, kind of balanced body strength. So I'm a firm believer that pretty much anything you're doing is going to help you in everything that you're doing. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
that's how I like to think about it so that I can make room for everything and not feel like I'm taking away from the triathlon on my Spartan days and taking away from the Spartan on my other days. I think it all serves the same good, which is making my body as strong and is having as much endurance as I can.
yeah, I think to your point also, or from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds like you're really just trying to build that mental resilience as well. And for that specifically, as you say, like anything that's hard, whether that's cold water exposure, whether that's a bike or so, a bike ride is still going to help your run because it is helping that mental resilience. I think when people are trying to become the very, 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 very best in one discipline, that's a different story necessarily. So, like, if someone is wanting to be the best sprinter, then perhaps going on a 5 hour endurance ruck or whatever is not going to be that beneficial, even though it's going to help them with mental resilience as well.
Yeah.
But it is going to take away from the sprinting ability. But I think in endurance sports and in general, where it comes to things like just maintaining that mental resilience, I think that's a very good point. So I guess to that point as well, in with all the races, do you have one specific race or event or day in your life that you remember that was the hardest? You were so close to giving up. Everything felt like it sucked, or maybe everything hurt. And how did you get through that?
Ironically, I wouldn't I just did the Ironman, which was the longest race that I ever done, but I wouldn't put it into that category. And I think it's just a function of the fact that I just prepared for it, with such, consistency and determination that by the time race day came, like it was a long day, but, I knew every step of the way I was going to finish. And, even when I got really tired, like, it never made me wonder like how am I going to get how am I going to get through this? As I think back to, to the ones where I wasn't so sure. The Boston Marathon that I did this year in 2024, which was my first marathon in 23 years, I was on a great trajectory in my training, and I kind of got up to about the 20-mile mark, and I was feeling good. But then I tore a tendon in my left leg, in my hamstring, and it hurt a ton. And I tried to run through it for a week or two, and it was impossible. I mean, it was so painful. So I had to stop. I got a scan, confirm the tear, and they basically said the only way that this is going to heal is with rest. Like you just have to do nothing. And I was 6 weeks away from the marathon at that point. And so they basically said, like, just do nothing, no running for 6 weeks. You're going to rest it. You can do cross training. And then whether you're able to run the marathon or not, we don't know. Like, you're just going to have to figure it out that, when you get there. And so literally, I just did a ton of physical therapy. I'm a huge proponent of that. But none of it was running. And 2 days before the marathon, I did a practice 5K. I took it really slow, but it didn't hurt. So I said, okay, I'm gonna run the marathon. I'm gonna give this a try. And that whole day, I had no idea whether or not I was going to be able to do that race, and that was scary. I didn't know whether it was going to like start hurting at mile 2 or mile 8 or mile 12. But I was like, I'm just going to give this a try because I had spent so much money, so much time, excuse me, raising money for the event. And I felt such a debt of gratitude to all the people that supported me. I raised over $15,000
Cool.
for a wonderful organization that supports the inclusiveness for people with disabilities. It's called Team Hoyt. It's not my foundation, but it honors Dick and Rick Hoyt, who were beloved in the marathon and triathlon community because it was a father who pushed his disabled son in all these races. And so I just felt like I want to come through for all these people who supported me. And so I just, every mile of the race, I just said, okay, I'm going to take it one more mile, one more mile. And I had no idea how the whole thing was going to end. And I finished it. And at the finish line, I just remember this feeling of just incredible gratitude. That somehow, despite the odds, my tendon allowed me to go 26 miles when I hadn't run in 6 weeks. So, that's what comes to mind in terms of your question, Lisa. Like, they're not all a slam dunk. Sometimes you run into obstacles along the way and your training doesn't go the way you thought it would, and you get to race day and you just don't know how it's going to go.
I do think you
But
went about it in a very smart way. First of all, with the physical therapy. Second of all, listening to the therapist,
yeah.
because there would be plenty of people who would panic, still try to run, and then third,
Yeah.
doing like an easy practice run. And I think still sometimes people quote unquote force themselves to run on that day and then they have a long-lasting injury afterwards. But because I mean, in the moment, pulling out is so difficult. You
Yeah.
are rushed with adrenaline all throughout your body and stuff, so you're feeling good and then the pain comes afterwards. So I do think that you went about it in a very smart way. So I guess that also required a calm mindset beforehand and just accepting things as they were, because in the end you can't really change it. What happened with the injury and so on. So outside of the actual training, is there any quote unquote mindset work that you do, like specific reading, journaling, mantras, like anything that helps you get through tough moments or helps motivate you?
Yeah, I've really gained a lot by books that I've read, but also just people that I follow and listen to. And I've just on my Spotify, I've accumulated and curated these playlists that really really help me, and I narrow them to the particular mindset I want to be in. So, for example, I have a playline that I call my starting line playlist, which is really the mindset I want to be in the week leading up to the race and on race morning. I have a separate playlist for like the during the race, like the things I need to be thinking about as the race is going on. And then I have my training playlists, and it's all about positivity. It's all about believing you can overcome obstacles. If anybody wants to listen to these, there's actually links to them on my website. So, they're all public and, I've got some people that subscribe and listen to them as well. But, because, I remember hearing about a study that was conducted, and I think this has been replicated many times, where people were given a particularly difficult task to do, like a just physical, like a mental task that they had to do in a lab. But before the task, they were given messaging that was basically like, oh, like this is going to be a really hard task, but you're capable of doing it, and you'll be fine. And other people were given the messaging of this is going to be really hard. You may not be able to do this. A lot of people fail it. And same task, same kind of randomized controls. The people who were given the messaging that this is going to be really hard, you might not be able to do it. A lot of people have failed. They did much worse on the task than the people who were giving the messaging that, hey, this is, you should be able to do this. We think you got this. And the what you fill your mind with has a massive, even though some of these listen to some of these things, they may seem corny. I really believe they have a massive effect on just the general mindset you put yourself in as you go about your day.
I 100% agree. Like such a big believer or fan of like even mantras, putting sticky notes up, and like the more you can visualize and like keep holding on to the desired outcome already and seeing yourself like crossing the finish line, or like especially in sports, like sports visualization and psychology is so interesting, so interesting, where we know that athletes that even you tell them don't visualize yourself throwing, or visualize yourself throwing the ball, making that dunk or whatever and hitting that pitch, and they're not practicing, but a few weeks later, they're still better actually. And even their muscles adapt a little bit to that. So it's so interesting. But then, of course, even just like in your case, where you see yourself literally like crossing the finish line, maybe even your wife is on the other end, and afterwards you're visualizing your meal and also visualizing yourself getting through those tough miles. I don't know what a tough mile is in an Ironman or a marathon, but let's say mile 35 or not 35, like it really, far
Right.
down the road, wherever you're hitting that sort of, um, yeah, a bit of a wall, because that moment is going to come, and no matter what endeavor you have, it's always a little bit easier in the beginning, in the end, but the middle lull, that's kind of difficult. So I love everything that you're saying, and just the books, the surrounding yourself with people that elevate you, that expand your thinking as well. So I think you've given us so many great tips. I'm going to summarize a few of them just for the listener, and please add if I've forgotten any. But one of the first things that you mentioned was generally surrounding yourself with people that motivate you, that have your desired habits, just picking some sort of goal to help hold yourself accountable, and then working towards that, giving yourself enough time, really, really prioritizing recovery as much as you're prioritizing the training aspect as well, through nutrition, through sleep, through other recovery methods, perhaps. And then, yeah, just keeping on building and making sure that you're breaking the limiting beliefs that we all impose on ourselves. Those were some of my main takeaways. Is there anything you would like to add to that, or anything else you'd like to leave the listener with?
One thing I really would like to add to this, because it's becoming just more and more what's helping to continue to drive me, because a lot of the stuff that I do is exhausting. And it's easy at times to kind of be like, all right, like I'm just, I'm kind of getting tired of this, or maybe I'm going to take it down a notch, or kind of you kind of lose momentum, you lose hope. But really what I'm trying to do is connect it with, okay, yes, I'm doing these things, but how is it helping other people? So I have a very supportive wife who supports me in everything that I do, but how am I helping her? She's a thriving artist. How am I helping her in her goals and her, so it's not just about, okay, I have my three big races this year, but what are her three big, goals for the year, and how am I helping her? How am I helping these same people on this running club that I was talking about who give me so much inspiration? How do I help them and my friends? But also just all the people that I'm blessed to interact with on social media, in my local community, how do I help them achieve their goals? And if I start to take if my energy starts to ebb, if my commitment starts to ebb, then I'm letting all of them down. And I really think it's important to make this kind of energy sustainable is that you connect it to a purpose that's broader than yourself. And hey, sometimes I struggle with that. And it can easily just get about, kind of what I need to do and, my goals and then, how hard this is for me. But the minute I can turn it around and look outwardly, all of a sudden it just gives me so much more energy because I'm not doing it for myself anymore.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, I hope it inspires some other people as well to pursue their fitness journey, not just for themselves, but for the people around them as well, them as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Sean, for your time. It's been a true pleasure speaking with you. I'm going to make sure to link all your things in the show notes, your social media handle, for example, Instagram, Shawn Hoyt, stay active, if I'm not mistaken. I will link the playlist, the Spotify playlist as well, and of course your website. So truly, thank you so much for your time.
I really thank you so much for the opportunity. I've had a lot of fun listening to your podcast sessions, learned a lot in the process, and I hope someone learned something from this. If they do, I'll feel really good about it.
I'm 100% certain. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Lisa.